Oh, no. Eric, you've gone mindless. What happened? Help me out here. Who did this to you? Okay. Nope. Didn't help. I'm not going to move, Eric. I won't leave you.
Senseless tail.
Eric, you don't have a tail. Boy, you're really out of it.
Get popcorn, Theo.
Popcorn? That's a pretty tall order. You're going to have to give me some time.
No, movie podcasts. Mindless consumption need popcorn theology.
I thought to myself, I'd better narrate now. The attempt on Eric's life left me shaken and disturbed, and all the questions kept coming over and over again like bubbles in a case of a club soda. Who was this character in the hospital? And what happened to his tail? What's popcorn have to do with theology? Who's the greatest storyteller of all? Did the movie turn him into mindless consumer? And if it did he know about it? And if he didn't, who did? And where the heck was I?
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 342 of Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller and greatest comedian, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm Eric.
And I'm Miles.
Now, Miles, I don't want any more trouble like he had last podcast on the South Side. Understood? That's my policy.
Yeah, well, when I see 5 weirdos dressed in togas stabbing a guy in the middle of the park in full view of 100 people, I shoot them. That's my policy.
That was a Shakespeare in the Park production of Julius Caesar, you moron. You killed 5 actors. Good ones.
Good ones. I like that. It's almost like if they were bad actors, it would have been okay.
Well, I mean, if they were bad actors, you wouldn't have stabbed them. Yeah, right? It wouldn't have been believable. Yeah.
I almost wanted to tweak that one for our intro to be like, when I find 5 mindless consumers watching movies in full view of the internet, I don't know.
Yeah.
I shoot them.
It's like, those were Christians. Good ones.
Good ones. Mindlessly consuming, though.
Yeah.
But
right, and if you haven't guessed already by the title when you clicked on this, we are covering The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, directed by David Zucker and starring Leslie Nielsen, Priscilla Presley, O.J. Simpson, George Kennedy, and Ricardo Montalban. Montalban.
God! That's what
Con? I totally missed it.
I'm pretty sure it's Con. I didn't actually check, but I was like, that guy looks a lot like Con.
He looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not really the point of The Naked Gun, but a plot summary is Lieutenant Frank Drebin and his police squad are put in charge of security when it's announced that Queen Elizabeth II will be visiting from Los Angeles, California. Making a visit to Los Angeles, California. Frank visits the event organizer, a rich developer, Vincent Ludwig, or Con, who is also reputed to be a criminal mastermind who may also be responsible for putting one of Drebin's men, Nordberg, O.J. Simpson, in the hospital. stopping the plot to assassinate the Queen, solving the attack on Nordberg, and romancing Jane Spencer are all in a day's work for Drebin, along with several laughs along the way.
I will say, so I forgot to put this in the notes section. So most people have never seen, they're familiar with the Naked Gun, but they have no idea that it's actually based off of a television show called Police Squad. And it's an exclamation point. And it's a hilarious show. I grew up watching it. I think it only ran for like one season, 8 episodes, something like that. But one of the things that they did every single episode is during the intro where they're running the credits and showing who's in the episode, they would have like a really famous actor in just the opening skits. And in every opening skit, they would die. And so it's kind of interesting that they have O.J. Simpson, who is at the height of his popularity, the other reason why he's super popular, famous, I would guess. They have him get like blown away, but lives, which is kind of a different, which is a twist on their patterns, though. It was just kind of an interesting thing where it's like, oh, look at that.
What's funny is
they kept up with it.
I didn't even really connect it. In my head, I saw the Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. I thought it was from the Files of Police Academy. And I was like, is this somehow connected to Police Academy? And it's vaguely 80s, and I just, because this is for me, I've known of the Naked Gun, but it was my first introduction to it. But I do remember, I think it was you bringing up Police Squad in another podcast.
Yes, I think I forget which one. It was recently. I did bring up a Police Squad, and I think that's what put it in my the worm in my brain that got me to be like, hey, let's go ahead and cover Naked Gun. We wanted to do some sort of spoof film for Comedy Month, which we're in. So that's how we ended up with this. So let's go ahead and go to some spoiler-free thoughts on just what we thought of this episode. And so those that aren't familiar with our rating system that we do stale, fresh, or buttered and salted. Essentially, good, great, or bad. Good, great, or bad. Whatever. You'll figure it out as you go along. Listen to more episodes. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I thought this was fresh popcorn. To me, this is a ton of rewatchability. It's a joke a minute that you could watch it and then watch it immediately afterwards and pick up brand new jokes. I talked with my dad about this. He's like, the first time I saw it, there were so many jokes that like you were laughing while the next joke came along and you missed the next joke. So it's just a joke every second. You're bound to miss them. It's a very straightforward police movie. Remove the humor and you still have a decent romance drama movie, which is what spoofs are meant to be. It's the absurdity of the world is that they're exploring. I love the show. I love the show growing up. They had the opening credits, always had that gag, and I love that they continued on with it. It was kind of one of those things that part of the charm of the show was that they could get the big names, but they were not going to use them.
Yeah,
so,
that's funny in itself. It's like a wink at the audience, which is kind of what these type of movies really do.
Yeah.
Like you said, faster than you could even catch them. For me, this was barely fresh for me. I think I came in with my hopes a little high because I'd seen movies like this. Like I really like Airplane, and for me, there's one Hot Shots 2. Hot Shots 2 is so funny to me.
Is it Hot Shots
Part
2 or Part 2?
Part 2. Especially there's one line where they're battling and his army buddy takes out some bad guys and he just stands up and looks at the camera and goes, "War. It's fantastic," and looks and smiles. But for me it had all those similar patterns, but I actually think that some of the other movies are a little bit better in this area for me. But even on my rewatch of some scenes to prepare for the podcast, I saw its charm and its strange to say intellect, because so much of the humor is intelligently dumb.
Yes.
I think I would have absolutely loved this movie as a teenager.
Yeah.
I saw it a little bit too late. I think I would have just loved it. And one thing I noticed just looking on IMDb to get the name straight is David Zucker directed this along with Pete Segal, I think. But Zucker in this genre in particular, is incredibly prolific. He directed Airplane. He directed 3 Naked Gun movies. He directed 3 Scary movies. He wrote and directed some of those.
Number 3 through 5, which star Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, and I think Scary Movie 3 is kind of the one that I like. I don't like the Scary movies as much. They've got some moments, but Scary Movie 3, the Leslie Nielsen parts are pretty funny. But David Zucker, he's got this niche, and he's made a ton of these.
No, there's a slew of them, and some of them are, honestly, a lot of them are shockingly good. It's like you would think that this type of genre would get old very quickly. Well, honestly, it did. Like the Not Another Teen movies and stuff, which I love the first one, but like all the Not Another series all just became stupid. Even the Scary Movie ones. But yeah, so there was obviously Airplane 2, the Naked Gun films, both Hot Shots. I grew up more with Hot Shots 1. Never saw Top Gun until I was like an adult, but I grew up with I grew up with Hot Shots. So I was like, oh, this movie is very similar. This is a serious version of Hot Shots. And so it was fun. And then one that gets overlooked a lot, it was a Val Kilmer film called Top Secret. And that one has some great skits in it as well.
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch of them. They don't make a lot of good spoofs anymore. They lean, in my opinion, a lot of them lean way too much on the raunchy side versus the actual humor side. More of the modern ones. So with that, let's go ahead and move into a little bit of our theology. And so we use our rating of diluted, carbonated, or cup runneth over. And essentially what that means is diluted is like we're scraping by on some ideas, theological things to talk about. Carbonated is, hey, there's got 2, 3-ish good points that we could probably go a little bit deeper. And then cup runneth over is like, there's so many themes and we can dive into it. So just to keep it rolling, I'll go first. This is diluted. There's not much there. Like I said, it's a decent plot for like remove the humor. It's an okay movie. But you're watching it for the humor, so there's not much there. There aren't too many themes, but there are definitely things to talk about, and in particular what role humor and specifically spoof play in like the Christian life. So there's some stuff to talk about. Yeah,
this is one I would agree. I'm actually in some ways, I'm kind of excited to do a diluted movie because I feel like every movie, just because I get excited to do Popcorn Theology, it's all the cup runneth over, But this was pretty diluted, and I think these movies, by design, their plot is thin. Kind of like Not Another Teen movie. The idea is we're exploring the tropes of these movies, so it's not going to be anything particularly novel in the core plot.
Exactly.
But it pokes fun at those tropes, which has its own fodder for conversation there. So I found this to be a really good challenge, especially like it took me a long time to work on the intro. It actually made me really impressed with how clever these lines are, because trying to make one that's kind of popcorn theology in the style of the Naked Gun or Airplane, took me a while.
It gives you, and I think you do mention it later on in your notes, but it makes you give a huge appreciation to Weird Al, because I mean, it's like, you're right. He doesn't have to come up with music, but he has to write a song in the style of someone else and make it make sense and and be funny. And
So this one was a good challenge, a pretty fun flick.
Yeah. So we do have a little. So we've tried to start doing with this. We haven't been as consistent with it, given a little bit of actual motion picture association ratings on it, just letting people know kind of some of the content warnings and stuff. This is a PG-13 movie and a 1980s PG-13 movie. So they were pushing that boundary a lot of times on the on closer to the R content. There is a naked butt in the first probably 5 minutes of the film during the opening credits. It's kind of it's like there and you miss it type of thing, but just wanted to let you know. There's a few anatomically correct statues later on in the film, and there's some suggestive scenes involving those statues. Again, this type of movie. It was kind of the prototype, if you want to kind of look at it like as far as innuendo, that the later ones became almost all of their comedy. It did lean into the innuendo type of jokes, but it is what it is. Yeah, viewer discretion is advised. Again, PG-13. All right, so well, it looks like we do have general unity on this, and don't worry, Popcorn Theologian. Don't worry. No Popcorn Theologian will rest for even a minute until we've cracked this theological case of the Naked Gun. And now for an ad break. Before we get into the movie, I want to encourage you to like and share this episode with your friends. Let's broaden the conversation. You want to hear more? Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube. One quick way you can help support the podcast is just to rate and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen. Or you can support us financially through Patreon. Yes, donating a few bucks per month will make you a patron saint. This gives you special access to an exclusive Facebook group, channel on the public Discord server, and are brand new for our premium seats. $4.99 a month. You get all the exclusive content, merch, and a brand new segment called In the Lobby, where we interview guests, talk about broader themes than just individual movies, and do live Q&As with the hosts.
And if you join, it'll be like you fell in love. You'll notice things that you never knew were there before. Birds singing, dew glistening on a newly formed leaf, and stoplights.
Popcorn Theology has been mindfully viewing cinema from a godly perspective since 2015. But why? Where did it come from? Well, one of the inspirations was our host James Harleman's book, Cinemagogue, published in 2012, exploring the intersections between film and faith. And now, fresh off the press, is an updated edition of the book, the Cinemagogue Director's Cut. This version contains over 40 pages of new content with reviews and recommendations, movie references, illustrations, further shaping the story-formed argument for God's existence while also delving deeper on hot topics like how we deal with sex and nudity in film. It's the how-to guide for all things popcorn theology. And this time, it's not just available on Kindle and in paperback, but also a hardcover edition for all you true book lovers. So if you like movies, if you're a cinephile, if you spend hours talking film, this book is definitely for you. Or if you're a casual consumer who thinks movie making exists merely for diversion, this book may just change your life. Cinemagogue available now at Amazon.com. For bulk orders or signed copies, check out Cinemagogue.com for details.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail in the twilight's last gleaming?
Hey, is that Enrique Palazzo? It's Enrique Palazzo. What is it?
Oh, wow. And we're back. We've dropped the spoiler warning as we dig deeper, as deep as you can, into the Naked Gun. All right, let me do our popcorn sounds here so we can get going.
Yeah.
All right, so Miles, you thought this was barely fresh. So kind of tell us a little bit why was that?
Yeah, I expected it to be a little bit funnier, but I think that's probably just my time in This movie is a little older than me. And it's kind of like when you see a classic that set the stage for many others. I know Airplane was actually like 8 years older than this, but still, this was like a classic. And so, like, my first watch was probably unfair. I haven't seen it, and I didn't have the background of Police Squad. Or even when you say, what are some standout moments? Well, there are some jokes that are pretty great. The blimp joke is great.
Good year.
Girl dies in a blimp accident. Good year? No, worst ever. And so there's some real brilliance to it, but yeah, it was just like barely fresh for me, and I expected to have it a little higher in my opinion.
Yeah, no. So obviously, I thought it was fresh. Again, the jokes to me were fantastic. I've always loved the more subtle type of humor. I grew up watching a whole bunch of spoofs and stuff. Like, I would watch The Police Squad with my dad. And so it's like the type of humor we grew up with. A lot of the Georges, not just I say it this way. I'm one of the least funny members of my family. I take life a lot more serious than some of them. But everyone's joke, everyone jokes. Everyone has a very dry type sense of humor. Very much always looking for how to break any situation with humor. And so this movie is literally right up my family's alley, and it's the type of stuff I grew up, watching. But I did want to, and I'm really looking forward to this segment of our conversation. Is so we're doing Popcorn Theology. We're doing Comedy Month, and this is the penultimate episode. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like the point and purpose of comedy, and obviously, since we're watching spoofs in particular, and kind of like some of my ideas. And Miles, you can chime in here, as you see fit. Is spoofs examine the mundane in life and find how you can make it humorous if taken literally. And there's the one scene in it, like towards the end, where the bad guy goes, Drebin, and the girl goes, Frank. And he goes, you're both correct.
Yeah.
It's just those types of things. That there's a line in the TV show that I remember. And when the person pours a cup of coffee and hands it to him, it's like, coffee? And he goes, yes, it is. It's like just the things that mundane life, like the English language, like how it's used. The opening skit we did, like a word said one way can mean something completely different to the person if taken it literally in another sense of the word. And that's one of the things I've always loved about spoofs, is that they look at the mundane in life and find out how it can be absurd or humorous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the other things is that humor does, and spoofs in particular, is they'll purposely take a situation that shouldn't happen and just like blow it way out of proportion. So the other end of the spectrum, going from the mundane to like how that happened, and they just make it the extreme and the absurd. And the example in this is the fire scene where he burns down that entire that entire.
And the whole point is he's tried so hard to be quiet, and then that's often what it feels like when you're trying to do something. It's like, my work is cursed, thorns and thistles, and it just gets so out of hand. Yeah. So one of my sisters, and it reminds me of real life. It goes back to real life. One of my sisters, this was years ago, probably when we were all teenagers. She saw a TV commercial where a young guy was driving down the street. He was blasting "Another One Bites the Dust," and he was like, he had his arm out the window and he was going like, rocking to the beat. And then the scene zooms out. It zooms out, and the guy, he's driving a hearse. And my sister thought this was hilarious. I have no idea what the commercial was advertising. No idea what it was advertising. She thought it was hilarious, and she joked. And she goes, she says, I want this played at my funeral. And so that's just kind of what our family did. That reminds me of one of my favorite patterns of jokes was those Geico commercials back in the 90s and 2000s. I like them to illustrate kind of the Christian life where something terrible would happen. Obviously terrible. Car gets busted or anything. and the person says, "Hey, I got great news. I just saved 15% or more on car insurance by switching to Geico," you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of what the Christian life is supposed to do to you, is that you have good news. You have great news. And so it's funny, of all the things I've seen on TV in particular, that illustrates kind of how in my best moments as a Christian, that's how the gospel affects me. It's hilarious how much the things of the world don't matter in light of the gospel, things like that. So every once in a while, a comedy skit or movie spoof can highlight something much better than anybody's dissertation or drama written about the topic.
No, absolutely. And that goes right in what I was going to say, is like the question I was going to ask was, how does this align with what we find in the Bible? Aren't Christians supposed to be very serious people because our message is very serious? I mean, you get that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a Puritan basher, but you like read some of the Puritans and you're like, I was like, is there any joy in your guys' life? Like, this is like, you have an awesome savior. You have an amazing, mighty God. The most powerful being in existence has sent his own son to redeem you. And he did it in Jesus's life. Jesus even used humor to illustrate his points. David, I think you have a couple, not David, sorry, Miles. Officer Miles.
Yeah, I got Officer Miles. Chief Eric, you can call me whatever you want. I'm devoted to justice. Jesus has a few jokes in his teaching that, like a real serious person tries to figure out, okay, well, how could a camel get through an eye of a needle? And Jesus is going, look, your religious merits-based salvation way of looking at the world is ridiculous. Your trust in your wealth, in particular in the camel going through the eye of a needle, is ridiculous. You can't do it. You can't cling on to wealth and greed and follow me. It's like an animal. It's like a camel trying to put a camel through the eye of a needle. And I know there's linguistic arguments. Something might be, whatever he's saying there. I still think it's camel through the eye of a needle. He's trying to basically say, you're being ridiculous. You're Frank Durbin.
Yeah, and there's ridiculous things in the Bible that are meant to make you laugh when you read it. You've talked about the Jabba the Hutt of the Bible. You've talked
King
about
Eglon.
him.
It's great, Jabba the Hutt. And that'll make you remember little Ehud stabbing Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, and that story's so funny. Ehud, he stabs Jabba the Hutt. I think it's hard to tell. He climbs out either through a window or through the toilet, actually, as some people suggest. And then the guards outside, it says they waited because there was like a bad smell. They waited until they were embarrassed because they thought that he might be relieving himself. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
There's a scene almost like that in Naked Gun, where there's people outside while Frank Durbin they hear him as opposed to smell him. But that's a funny story. If you don't think that's funny, there's something wrong with you.
And this thing, there's humor all over. And again, it's that thing. And I think I have this my points later, but I'll say it now. It's like, because Christians have hope, technically, we're the only ones with hope. We're the only ones that can actually find humor in the bad things in life. We can have
the world
we can find joy. Our worldview allows us to have some levity when a serious situation happens, because at the end of the day, at the end of all things, it's all good. It's all good. And
there's that classic drama icon of a sad face and a happy face, right? The two stories, comedy and drama. And in the ancient sense of the word, comedy and drama, or comedy and tragedy, was all about basically the shape of the plot. The drama was usually where somebody's life started out well, kind of high, and ended low. And comedy is life started low and ended high. And that kind of reminds me of like a puzzling thing I remember finding about of Dante's Divine Comedy.
Oh yeah.
And just not understanding that the name of that
work is not
work
funny at all.
is not funny at all. But the shape of the story is it has a happy ending. You're like, oh, well, we believe Christianity is true. The story that we're in has a happy ending, and that gives us hope. And that's in the like dramatic sense, that's the shape of the story. Whereas spoofs and comedies kind of have a different name in our generation, where it's poking fun at things. But one thing I like about comedies is you look at them and they have that structure, which means that they're often a little more Christian-shaped stories.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think also that comedy works. This will be one of my points, because this is diluted, and so Eric and I might repeat ourselves a little bit, is that comedy often only works because it highlights the rules of behavior, either the way things ought to be or the way things actually are, like the way people actually behave. And it holds up a mirror to our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we recognize some truth that they are playing with in the movie. So this movie is playing with our love of those justice stories. One cop against the world, you know, clearing his name, saving the girl, you know, all that stuff.
Burt Macklin.
Macklin. It's the Burt Macklin joke. You're right. Man.
Yeah.
And then also to get a little bit more serious about it, like some of the jokes in the movie that we would say be wary of is that many jokes have a certain evil side, because what they do is they help you follow a pattern, but then they try to lead you to a sinful thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the biblical sense, it was we make somebody stumble. So for example, like 1 Corinthians 8:13 is talking about the freedom Christians have to eat whatever they want in Christ. But there's a principle in there that I think applies to comedy. It says, "Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat lest I make my brother stumble." And I think there's a certain type of comedy where we say, if comedy makes my brother stumble, I will never make this kind of joke.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of struggled with this because as a teenager, I loved to make people laugh. I craved that. But a lot of times I would do some version of the "that's what she said" jokes. I'm even nervous saying that on this podcast, because I might make people think of "that's what she said" jokes. But the essence of that comedy is trying to get somebody to think a wicked sexual thought, so that everybody goes, you know, and we have this moment together. But that's actually the reason why that joke is funny, is because we all recognize it's kind of evil to make everybody's mind go there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we laugh it off because it makes us all kind of uncomfortable. And they are funny. Those jokes often are really funny. They're just also evil.
Yes.
You know, they're just, in my opinion, that might be my hot take. But
it's part of the and it's not exclusive to the comedy. It's it's really one of those things where it's read the room, like that not doing XYZ because you're brother. Yeah, it's like you have the freedom to do. Yeah, it's not anything, but you have the freedom to do anything. But read the room. Like, it's like
the freedom is so that you love, right? The freedom
exactly. What one thing I talk about is. This is how Popcorn Theology gets. We get deeper sometimes when we don't
even try.
Yeah, so this is nowhere near in our notes. But one of the things that happens. Sorry, I'll throw that point out. Get a little bit back on track. Is so
that's
again,
some discipline.
I talked about so this style of humor. Like I said, a lot of members of my family, like we gravitated to this type of humor, always trying to cut the tension with some sort of joke or anything. And it actually did help my family. We had my sister, she was on her deathbed, literally. And I was able to crack a joke relating about the hearse incident. She's the one that had joked years ago about wanting that played out at her funeral. So she's on her deathbed, and I go, "Cassie, I need to make sure. I need to ask you something very seriously. Were you serious about that?"
Yeah.
It was like everyone in the room laughed because everyone knew the story. She was mostly unconscious, but had enough to kind of like laugh herself and everything. And it's just thing. And in the tribute video, not during the actual funeral service, we're not morbid people, but in the tribute video, we did play a mariachi version of Another One Bites the Dust in her honor. And it was great. And we put it towards a funny segment of things that she had done funny over the years and made it a family thing. We did get a couple comments from people that were like, "You guys played Another One Bites the Dust." I was like, "You guys are sick people. You're sick people."
A little bit.
I was like, hey, it helped us as family. She's a Christian. We're Christians. We had hope. We know that we're all going to be laughing about it in heaven. All right. With that, let's go ahead and move on to our theology segment.
It's like we were already stealing a drink.
I know.
I tend to do that at the end of our popcorn section. But this is but it's fun. We really had to scrape for this. It's almost, well, I guess by our analogy, because we both thought it was diluted. This is like a stale drink that has sat out for a while since 1988, and then we finally took a drink.
Yeah, and we're
scraping by.
We're like, we know why people liked it, but
but even for me, I can find Jesus in almost anything. Yeah. This one was tough. But but we've already kind of talked about comedy a little bit. So Eric, as the one who chose this movie, what's something theologically interesting about it?
All right, what the thing that I really took out of it, and the way I said, is life is too serious to take too seriously. And so in Psalm 90, verse 10, it says, "Our days may come to 70 or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away." And when you're only got 80 years, if you're strong, it's not a lot of time. I mean, so I'm almost halfway there. I'm over halfway there.
And Leslie Nielsen,
if it's only 70.
That's one thing that's funny about these movies. Leslie Nielsen was a little closer to the end of life. That was something that is funny in the movies. They never even really point out is that he's an old looking guy in all these.
I think he was one of those born old guys, though.
Yeah.
I think he was white hair when he was probably in his 20s, but this is when he started. This was his transition. Most people don't know this. This was his transition from a serious actor, or like Police Squad and some of the others, from being a serious actor to the comedy actor that my entire generation knows him as. I actually saw a anthology horror film years ago where he was a serial killer in it. And this was probably been like in the 70s, something like that. And it's a very fascinating scene. It was like, we would call it playing against type, but no, like Frank Drebin is against type for him. It's like he was a serious horror type of actor. So
surely you can't be serious.
Well, that's a different actor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I can't be Frank. Yeah, I am Frank. No.
You can't be Frank. Oh, nice. Nicely done.
Yeah. But no, anyway, so like films like this, they remind you to have that joy in life. That's really the point, is like you don't have to be serious about everything in life. It allows you to just go and just take a breather and laugh about the mundane things in life, the humor of the absurd things in life, even when something crazy like, I don't know, a medical emergency or a fire burning your apartment down. As long as no one has died, laugh.
Yeah.
Laugh about it. It's probably an apocryphal story, but there's a story about, I think it was Thomas Edison, where one of his factories burned down, and someone came up to him, and he was standing outside just watching it burn. And there was like, "Oh, what are you going to do?" It's like, "No, this is fantastic because all of my mistakes are being burned away right now." And it's like he just viewed it as this thing. He was like, "This is a great fire. Let's just sit back and enjoy it and watch it because all my mistakes are gone." And like I said, it's probably an apocryphal story, but there's some truth to that type of approach in life. Is that, hey, no one's seriously injured, no one died. Let's just go ahead and have a little bit of fun. And don't be so life is funny. And that's one of the things I was noticing in this film is none of the characters know they're in a comedy. Yeah. None of them know they're in a spoof. Like some spoofs, like that they know they're kind of part of this insane world, and they kind of just play it up. But no, no one recognizes that everything around them is hilarious.
Yeah,
they're just going with the flow. That this is the normal world. This is how it is. But no, it's all funny. And as Christians, we truly are the only people who can actually have actual joy in this life. I believe it's part of common grace that the unbeliever has joy, and they are able to experience those seeds, the first fruits, if you want to view it that way, from the first few fruits of joy. But Christians get to have the bounty. We get to have the bounty of it. We get to have the marriage feast. And at the end of the day, so we just go from comedy to comedy. And
It actually reminds me of like a movie I was hoping to cover in Comedy Month, maybe next Comedy Month, is Wayne's World. And I love how at the end of that movie they do like the tragic ending,
yes,
and the Scooby-Doo ending, and the ultra mega happy ending, and all of that is kind of funny. But Christians have the ultra mega happy ending.
Yeah.
Like I don't even remember exactly what the phrasing was, but yeah. And it just it's almost like an argument because we Christians often, because there are some very serious things, and we're about our Father's business.
Mm-hmm. It is true. So I'll say it this way: we are at war. It's like the gates of hell will not prevail against God. Yeah, against God's army, and so like we are at war. But talk to enough soldiers, and that there's the gallows humor, which is a different type of humor, but. Yeah, it's like there's humor. They find humor in war, and it's just everywhere. It's built into the fabric of reality, and that's why I started out at the beginning. God is the greatest comedian. He knew what he was doing. He made it funny. The male-female dynamic is one of the funniest things that ever existed, and how the human race has continued to populate itself when male and females can be so different. Is one of God's greatest comedic performances that he's ever done. But before I move on, I just, again, this is how humor impacts your own life and growing up watching these movies. And doesn't have to do exactly with this film, but I've been in banking for 16 years. I used to work on the branch side of banking, and one day we got robbed. A person came in, it was this whole crazy situation, and pushed the silent alarm. Anyway, the police show up about 10 minutes later, which is just always bugged me about how long it takes for police to show up in emergency situations. But anyways, neither here nor there. This another funny part of life when life is like when life and death is a matter of seconds. The police are only 15 minutes away. But anyway, so we got robbed, and I was inside on the phone with the police, telling them, hey, this is what it is. And so the police pull up and they say, hey, we need someone to come outside. And so the rest of the people, this is why I hate democracy too, is they voted that I go outside. I was like, we're going to have to go outside. As I go outside and see the police. And as I go outside, and to my left, there are two police officers that are talking to me, calling out to me, and they have their rifles pointed at me. I was like, okay, whatever. So I start walking that way. I just decided to glance over to my right, and there's a third police officer who's got his arm up on a car with his rifle pointed at me, and I realized it's my car. I was like, I just noticed this like funny situation. I was like, he's using my car to protect himself while he's pointing a gun at me. It's like this is insane. This is insane. But anyways, like, watching movies like this, growing up with movies like this, it allowed me to just find that humor in what was admittedly a stressful situation, but it was just I found humor. I was literally laughing as I was walking to the police officers, had them turn around, patted me down, made sure yada yada, and then we went about our business. Anyway, so one of my favorite quotes from this film was it's a nonsensical statement. It's one of those like the first time you hear it, you go, "What? It doesn't make any sense." But I just thought it was funny. It's like it goes, "Cops and women don't mix. It's like taking Drano. It will clean you out, but it will leave you empty inside." It's like, what? What? But that really, it does start to touch into one of the only actual plot points in this is kind of like romance and stuff. And which I think, Miles, you may have a point a little bit later on with that. But with that, we can start to transition over to your points.
Yeah, like on your like not taking life too seriously. And I remember like Mark Driscoll, for all his thoughts, one time said something that just really stuck with me. Was, let's take Jesus seriously and not take ourselves too seriously. Mm-hmm. That's what we do here. And I was like, that's a good piece of advice. Is let's find out the things that are worth taking seriously, and then the other things don't take too seriously. And then there's just like the Bible supports a bit of joking. It's not everywhere. It's not too often. But again, Jesus, when he's teaching, we were talking a little bit about camel going through the eye of a needle. One of my favorite passages in all of Scripture, Matthew 7, where Jesus talks about don't judge. He explains it. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? That kind of thing could be in a Naked Gun movie. Where somebody's like saying he's got a log sticking out of his eye, a beam. It's literally like a support beam in the Greek, sticking out of his own eye and being like, here, let me get that for you. Looking at somebody's speck. I can't believe you'd come in here with a speck. That's like from one of these movies. Or even some kind of crude humor. If you go back to the book of 1 Kings, when there's the showdown between the prophets of Baal and Elijah, it says in 1 Kings 18:27, it says, and at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, for he is a god. You're talking about Baal. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. So it's like, cry louder to wake up your God. You know, and he's doing this trash talk. Mentioned, maybe he's going to the bathroom. Maybe he's gone on a long journey. Maybe he's asleep. You need to wake him up. And just like, wow, that's, like the uptight Christian might be like, we don't do these kind of things. But we might when we're facing off against the ridiculousness of prophets of Baal, right, who are coming up against God, or people who hypocritically judge. And Jesus is like, you're like a guy who's carrying around a beam in his eye. And so there's jokes in the Bible, and they will often be useful in a way that a straight discourse, a straight description might not. But sometimes humor. That's why there's like the jester in the king's palace.
Yep.
The one who can say something that a king might not hear directly from somebody, but will kind of remind them that they are mortal and that they have that there are issues that they might not be seeing. And so, like for me, one of my main points here is kind of on the concept of comedies in general too, is that I noticed that absurdist movies play with us by giving us at every turn either exactly what we expect or the opposite, something we'd never expected. And that's basically what they do, is they pull you, they take you down a familiar road and then just jerk the wheel in another direction. And that's why it's so fun, right? So what do you expect in a cop movie? Right? Yeah. A lone hero on a mission to avenge his partner's injuries and clear his name, to save the queen and get the girl. Yeah, let's go. Right? A hero who's so dedicated to his work that his love life suffers. He's so committed to the law and justice that his personal life falls by the wayside. What a hero. And the audience goes like, yeah, that's what I want. Or they say, oh, it's so true. Mm-hmm. This reminds me of John Christ recently came out with a music video called This Is Every Christian Music Video. And it's great. It talks about like, we have a beautiful woman in here, but not too beautiful to cause our audience to stumble, and there's a vague disagreement. We don't know why the couple is fighting, but there's bills to pay, and it's just all these tropes. And cue the rain because water always makes things more dramatic, things like that. It's a pretty catchy song. But all he's doing is he's just like, look, I grew up in the Christian culture, and there are funny things that we do because we repeat these things over and over again. Or it's awesome that Weird Al made a cameo in this movie because he's like a symbol of kind of what these movies highlight. It's the strange patterns that we all kind of take for granted. Or if you've ever seen a video, it's like stuff pastors say, stuff Christian girls say, all those kind of things.
Well, Keith, I forget his last name, Keith Foskey, I think it is. He does he's called Ask Your Calvinist podcast or something like that. But he does a lot of these church if movies were churches or something like that. And it would be like Batman. It would be like the Reformed Baptist. Yeah, type of thing. Or there's like he'll be dressed up in like frilly shirts and be a Methodist. It was like he goes through, but he knows what, or it's like denominations. That's what it is. Denominations go to the shooting range, and it's like literally shoots like how each one shoots a gun, why they do it, and what they do, and it's hilarious because there's the differences in what makes stuff funny. It's again what you just said is it gives us what we expect in an unexpected way. We're expect to know what Presbyterians and Reformed Baptists are like. But then when he shows us what they're like, we go, yeah, that's actually kind of funny.
And in some ways, it's not, some comedy can be mockery or slander or mean-spirited. But other times, it's like, we are just taking a good look at ourselves. And the movies, this movie in particular, takes the framework of a good cop, good justice story. Right? And those are all your beats that you're expecting. And because we all recognize those things, then they throw in crazy, unexpected stuff. Like outlandish.
Like a beach montage.
Yes. And something tells me I'm into something good song. And then as he's walking away, the credits play like it's a music video. Right? Or like the credits are on screen. It's just...
Yeah. It's great.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Or for some reason, the thing that's so funny to me is after he impersonates that singer and butchers the Star Spangled Banner, then they see him on the Jumbotron in the final climax and somebody says, "Hey, look, it's Enrico Palazzo." Right? And that's just not what you expected. It's great.
Yeah.
This stuff everywhere. But what's interesting to me is that just this, like most movies, these types of movies make explicit what a lot of movies are implying and they're depending on, is that they have a standard of morality, a standard of the way things ought to go. And to quote our OG host, who would often just say, by what standard, whenever a movie is making a strong moral claim that other worldviews can't really support. It's like, by what standard is this funny? It's like, it's because we have tapped into the patterns of the world, the way life goes. And so comedy in its own way often points to the standards of good and evil. Even comedies that are about people doing terrible things. Oftentimes, if I'm engaging this from a Christian perspective, what these movies are supporting actually is how much we don't want to transgress those standards, and how much we all really believe. The only reason this is funny is because we all really believe that something is evil. So take, for example, like I've said a lot of these are my favorite jokes, but my favorite thing in this movie is when Ludwig is holding Jane hostage, showing his total disregard for innocent life. Frank goes, "Two can play at that game." And he grabs an innocent bystander and holds her hostage. It's wonderful. It's wonderful because because everybody knows that's funny immediately without going through the steps about why it's so funny. But the truth is, why is that so funny? It's because we recognize a key difference between good guys and bad guys is that the bad guys don't care about innocent life, right? And that they play by different rules. But instead, he pulls a hostage. That the bad guys, they don't care about hurting innocents. Good guys, they care about hurting innocents. Two can play at this game. I can top you.
Well, I saw it's a different Naked Gun movie. I think it's either 2.5 or 3 and 3/3.
33 and 33 and a third.
3 third. Yeah. Is like someone's pointing a gun at Frank, and he goes, "I've got you now. Any last word or any final request?" And he goes, "Yes. Give me the gun."
Yes.
It's the thing. It's like, we know it's not going to happen, but it's the absurd request that we go, that's funny because we know what's going to happen, but then we don't know what he's going to say. He gives it to us in an unexpected way.
He's butchering the national anthem, and the cops are running out on the field. But they have so much respect for the national anthem that he shouldn't be singing, that they're like putting their hand across their chest and like slowly inching across the field. And it's so funny because everybody's felt the tension while in a moment like that where you're like, okay, do I stand in this or do I deal with, whatever, something that spilled over? And it's just a good way of highlighting, again, the patterns of the world which exist that we live in for good or for ill, or whether they're transcendent or not. And it's just wonderful the way these movies just give us a look at it's almost like the Matrix, like pulling back and seeing the code underneath the lie, the world that we live. And then in a similar way, one of the patterns of these movies that I love is that absurdist comedy will also highlight people wildly taking others out of context. So the classic one is Airplane, "Surely you can't be serious." "I am serious, and don't call me Shirley."
Call me Shirley. Yeah.
And that reminds me of the book of Proverbs. There's this proverb. It says, Proverbs 23:9 says, "Do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words." And violating that or highlighting the way that fools do this it's a joke that's repeated hundreds of times in all of these movies. Now, to be fair to the Book of Proverbs, the context is more about somebody kind of like your talking head political hosts who are waiting to clip you out of context and show what an evil person you are to the other side, that kind of thing. But comedically, these movies support this point that don't speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. It's just great the way they poke fun at these things. And you already kind of highlighted this, like euphemisms. There's a nurse talking to Mrs. Nordberg, and she says, "Mrs. Nordberg, I think we can save your husband's arms. Where would you like it sent?" You know?
Yes, it reminds me. So that reminds me of a scene in the show as they catch the killer. One of the other quirks about the show, which was hilarious, is the title of the show was "Who Did It." So it literally was the episode title of an episode show would be like "The Butler Did It," and so it's always
really?
like it's like if you didn't know how the mystery was solved, just close your eyes during the title of it. So it's a little quirk of the show.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
but one of the scenes at the end of the show, they catch the woman that was the murderer in that episode, and they go, "All right, boys, run her in," and which is like it's a nonsense. It's not a nonsense statement, but everyone knows what that means, right?
Yeah.
Run her in. It's a police movie. So they would put her in the car and drive away, right? No, they have them line up on the line, and a guy takes a starting pistol and shoots it, and they literally run off into the distance with it. And it's those types of euphemisms where it's like the literal meaning of the word is where the humor it really lies a lot of
Arrested
times.
Development in the hospital.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we lost him. And
Yes.
we can't find him. He left, all that. The literal doctor. There's a compilation of that on YouTube. It's so good.
I wish all of us were doing this full time so we could just do the favorite comedy shows, comedy shows.
The actual shows
for a month.
Parks and Rec has almost made it.
Exactly.
So
We've
many
batted
times.
that idea around a couple times. It's just like, do we really have the time to dedicate 8 seasons to something?
But you know what? So we've been talking about the framework of comedy and how this genre plays with it. But there actually was one interesting theological point I got out of the happy ending, the comedy ending, is that I saw a theological principle kind of illustrated. It's not even a theological principle I like too much, but it's the moral influence view of the atonement is kind of modeled through the love of Frank and Jane in this movie at the end. And so at the end, there's this mind control thing, right? The mind control that had controlled Reggie Jackson to go try to kill Queen Elizabeth II, which is a hilarious statement to hear coming out of your mouth. But he's like, you're Jane. I love you. I because of you, I've noticed things I've never noticed before. The fresh dew on a leaf, traffic lights. All these things. It's like I wanted to give you this ring, but I only wanted to do it privately. And then he's on the Jumbotron at the moment. It's just great. But because he's on the Jumbotron, when the world sees the love that he has for her, that they have for each other, that conquers the mind control, right? The love breaks the spell, breaks the curse, breaks the control of the evil one who has over Jane, right? The prince of the power of this city, who has everybody fooled, right? The evil figure, Khan, in this movie, to keep running with that. And everybody on the Jumbotron sees their love, and when they see the love, peace abounds in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
The Angels and the Mariners baseball teams, they stop fighting and they shake each other's hands. The rival baseball fans, they hug one another. And then there's a stereotypical Jew and Arab in the front row. They hug each other. And I'm not sure if it cuts or it pans over. And then there's a dog and a mailman hugging. The lion is lying down with the lamb.
Yeah.
The baby is at the adder's nest.
Adder's den. Yeah.
Right. The peace reigns. And this actually, it's kind of wonderful because I believe that the divine love of God will redeem the world. But there's a lot of aspects to it. But there is a view of the atonement, of what Jesus accomplished on the cross, called the moral influence view of atonement. It's the idea that, as Romans 5:8 says, that God demonstrated his love for us in this: while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And that this in turn inspires us in the emotional sense to heal the world. And so the idea is that the key issue with humanity and God is that humans' fear and ignorance of God needs to be fixed. And it's fixed by God demonstrating his love for us in the death of Christ on the cross. And so the major effect of what Christ does is really about inspiring people. And so there's truth to that in Scripture. Romans 5:8, Hebrews 12 says, "Look to the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him went to the cross, and scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God." I believe that's from memory. I'm sorry. 1 Peter 2 has another passage about walking in the footsteps of Christ, who, when he was despised by people, didn't revile. So it is true that we look to Jesus as an example.
Yep. Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Yeah. There was a woman in my church this week. I was concerned with her because she's doing a lot for us, and I just said, "Are you okay? Are you doing too much? Is this?" And she just said, "I just looked to Jesus, who saw how so much he did for me, and I keep going." Okay, I'm just trying to care for my volunteers. But she, in a very concrete, practical way, just said, "I look to Christ, and that's what causes me to serve my community." And she's a wonderful servant. And so this can arguably be said to be a piece of the atonement, but I would disagree with Peter Abelard and the people following him in theological history who say that that's the essence of the atonement. It's only a piece. It's only a piece. And in this view of the atonement, I think it's difficult to explain how Jesus is dying for our sins sets us free in any way. And there's a ton of verses where it doesn't seem to quite cohere. But this happy ending through the example of love gives us a tiny slice of the gospel. And so it's great, right? A comedy has the shape of starting low. Liam Neeson, one man against the city, loses his badge. His friend's in the hospital. His girlfriend might be working for the enemy.
Yep.
Queen Elizabeth II might die. But by the end, the power of love overcomes all of these adversity, and the example shines through, and peace reigns in Los Angeles. And so as silly as it is, as absurd as it is, as we've been calling this category of movie absurdist, it shows this little piece of the gospel, of the moral influence view of the atonement, of how God's love can affect us and change us. So there's that's my Jesus juke of the movie.
That'll preach. That'll preach.
That'll preach.
Yeah. But honestly, you had a little bit of a Freudian slip there. You said Liam Neeson.
Oh, did I?
Yes, you did. Now, the
funny
funny thing
go for it.
is Liam Neeson is reviving the Naked Gun franchise, because for years people have made that mistake, and they've said Liam Neeson or Liam Nielsen, or it's like they've done the combinations back and forth.
Awesome, and he could investigate the death of O.J. Simpson.
My understanding is, and it could be wrong, the plot's still under wraps and stuff like that, is he's going to be playing Frank Drebin Jr. Awesome. And so he's going to be technically playing Leslie Nielsen's son, who is also an investigator, and it's going to be a Naked Gun reboot and stuff like that. So it's just kind of fun. I meant to mention that at the top.
Yeah, that would have been great for
part of the reason why we were covering this. But yeah, your little Freudian slip there, was like, hey, let's do it. let's go with it. And with that, let's go ahead and move into our extremely quick lightning round. That I will say that is one of the best lightning and thunder crack sounds I've ever heard. It's really nice. It's really really nice. So some ideas that we do a quick lightning round of just some, we call it receive, reject, and redeem aspects that we can get from the film. And so for me, I'll start with the reject is really that the sexual and coarse joking is one thing. Is like, I go back and forth on innuendo and stuff like that, but a lot of times things can go too far. Like I was mentioning the anatomically correct statues. It's like that's not appropriate for any human to be seen and witnessing. That sort of stuff. There's room for art. There's room for art, but these statues were not for art.
Yeah, and the woman in the scene is scantily clad, and
Yep.
biblically speaking, the only person who should see that much of her would be her husband, maybe a doctor or something like that. But, it's just not for an audience. And a lot of movies transgress that boundary, but I'm with you.
Yep.
As it's poking fun of that, it's something that we would reject. It's probably not a great thing to be joking about and displaying to people.
Yep. One of the receives is actually the police just being good guys. There wasn't like this moral ambiguity that they tried to do. It's like a lot of our society likes to basically put the burden of proof on the police versus the criminals, which, I mean, there's reasons why you do that in a court of law, beyond a reasonable doubt, that sort of stuff. But as a society at large in general, we're much more likely to be like, the police probably did something wrong, instead of going, no, those people literally just like looted that. And maybe the police got a little rough, rough with some looters. But who was looting? I'm sorry. Yeah. And so it's kind of one of those refreshing things. This is back in the 80s, the Reagan era, where the police were still viewed mostly favorably, and you could make the police are the good guys, and they're just doing a good job. As much as the police squad can actually do a good job, including taking down international terrorists in Beirut while on vacation. Yes, absolutely. And then a quick redeem that I had is actually the romance aspect of it, the love that Miles was talking about, is pursue the woman. Like, that's one of the things man was made for. Is like, that's part of our duty and calling, is to pursue the woman, to win your wife, and do it every day. But if you're not married, don't fornicate. Like, pursue her, win her, marry her, then do that. Don't do it ahead of time. So that's a redeem. The romance is great. It saves the world. Literally reconciles nations.
Yes, the love of a man and woman saves the world. It's wonderful. Yeah, that I didn't have any particular receive, reject, redeem, lightning round points. Again, it was a difficult movie, kind of diluted for me. But you did a great job with that round, Eric. And
thank you.
With that, as we conclude, would you like a nightcap?
No, thank you. I don't wear them. Well, the credits are about to roll on this episode, but before we go, remember, we've got our new Patreon tiers, and next week recording is we are doing the Patreon pick, where we are doing some Wallace and Gromit short films, really, 3 20-minute films that I believe James and Kat are actually going to be covering.
I think so.
Because they are Wallace and Gromit fans. But that's what you guys Patreons picked, and looking forward to listening to the episode myself. So until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective, and remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Woke up this morning feeling fine, had something special on my mind. Last night I met a new girl.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.